Hello, YouTube. LittleDerek.com back with another video, and we live in a digital world. We are constantly on our cell phones, on our laptops, tablets, and you're probably on some electronic device watching this on YouTube now. In this digital age we live in has paved the way for several new forms of art. So, with that being said, I am going to introduce you all to the world of digital art. So basically, what digital art is art aided by the use of technology such as computers, tablets, phones, etc. And it encompasses a lot of different things. You can make pixel art, animation, digital illustration, digital paintings, and even photography with digital art. So, what makes digital art so special? What's the key difference between a digital art piece and a traditional art piece? Well, essentially, when you have a digital work of art, it exists behind a screen, essentially. It doesn't physically exist. Where traditional art may entail, say, a canvas and paint or ink, digital art will essentially be code or a collection of pixels within the screen. And on the surface, that may appear as a digital downgrade, but there are a multitude of reasons why you might want to pursue digital art over traditional art. Firstly, it's just really accessible. Anybody that has a phone, a tablet, a computer, or even, other devices can make art. Not only that, but it can be relatively inexpensive because you can usually find some form of free software or an app on your phone to create something without having to pay anything at all, really. Not only that, but you don't have to constantly keep going out and buying art products and utensils and materials and supplies and whatnot. And this could just keep your workspace more organized because you don't have to worry about, sheets of paper and putting away different materials and things like that. Plus, you don't have to deal with the mess and cleanup that comes with things like charcoal or paint or anything of that matter. There can also be a level of efficiency to it because you have shortcuts and things like that to make it easier to correct mistakes and make the art process faster. Because you got to remember, you're working on a computer, which is kind of made for tasks like that to make life easier. And depending on what software you're using, you also have access to things like vectors, gradients, halftones. There's a multitude of things that are at your disposal once you work in a digital media. Lastly, there's that professional aspect to it. Like I said, we live in a digital age with a lot of digital things. People are always on their devices. So when you have something that's already formatted for a digital landscape, it's a lot easier to put it out to something like, say, Twitter or Instagram and just get your art out there. And a lot of companies, look for digital artists. A lot of people need graphic designers. There's people that take digital commissions and stuff like that. So, it would really help you out maybe to, look at some digital art making things. So, what are some cons of digital art? Well, I know I said it can be kind of easy to fix mistakes and things like that, and that kind of makes it good for beginners. However, there can be a pretty high skill ceiling depending on the software you're using, and there's a lot of just new things that you have to learn when you're utilizing digital art. With that being said, you kind of have to be somewhat good with computers or technology to troubleshoot some problems. You can't just get into this and not know how to work anything on a computer or a tablet or something like that. That's why it's usually a little bit harder for older folks to get into digital medium. Not to say that they can't, but it is a little bit harder. So the better you are with technology, the better you'll be at digital art. And something else that was somewhat of a contradiction to what I said earlier is that it's cost effective, which can be true, but at the same time, you might be paying a lot. You might be paying a monthly subscription to whatever software you're using. You might be paying a ton for hardware, say a new computer or something to make your art on, tablets and pin displays and all that. So it can be quite costly, depending on what you're doing. Not to mention your software can straight up crash. You have to constantly save all the time because you never know when or if your computer might die or when your internet's out or something like that. You kind of constantly have to monitor what you're doing or you can lose all of your work. It's kind of like if any of y'all are familiar with, say, Game Boy or PlayStation or anything, like when you needed a memory card or when you needed to save often, there wasn't an autosave, and the Game Boy might die, and now you've lost all the freaking 50 Pokemon you've collected that day. So, it's something like that that you have to worry about. There are also potential health problems that you could face. You're constantly staring at a screen, so that could cause some form of eye strain. You have to practice good posture because you may or may not be looking down at whatever your device is. So, those are a couple things to keep in mind as well. And a lot of the time, your art just won't be valued as high because you have digital art. Like I said, it's essentially pixels on a screen. It's not something physical like you'd have with traditional art that you can hang up on a wall or something of that nature. I mean, you could always print it out, but it's not going to be the same as seeing a paint stroke on a canvas or seeing line work that was done by hand. And since you can kind of copy and paste it essentially, it's not the same as an original work of art that can never be replicated again, essentially. Before I end off the cons of digital art, I do want to talk about this stigma around it that digital art is not real art. So, quick story time. For most of last year, I was working fast food, and there was one day where I needed to get something fixed on my car. So I took it to the tire shop, and I had to walk over there for my job essentially. So I'm walking back to my job after I dropped the car off, and I see this girl. She's taking a break from work, I guess, somewhere on the way there, and she's drawing, right? And I go over there, I talk to her, I'm trying to see what she's, drawing and whatever. And I tell her that I draw as well. And I happen to have my tablet on me, and I'm like, I take my tablet everywhere and I draw whatever. And that's when she kind of gave me a look, right? That's when she was like kind of a look of disapproval, right? And I can already tell where that look was coming from. So I go to my phone and I say, I also have pen and ink drawings. And I show her my traditional art, and then her eyes light up as if she had seen another artist, whereas she didn't see me as an artist a second ago. And I say that to say that even though there was no part of that interaction where she explicitly stated that she didn't care for digital art, I could tell by the body language that she wasn't rocking with digital art. And there's this kind of conception that because you work on a computer or a tablet or whatever, and you're not using traditional media, that you aren't a true artist. And that's not true. That's kind of gatekeeping, right? One con that I didn't mention is that if you do a lot of traditional art, you might be unfamiliar with traditional materials. And when I was in college and I was learning art, I had to kind of relearn how I did art because I didn't know how to use a lot of materials because all I did was work in digital medium. But that's not to say that I couldn't draw. I've always been able to draw even before I started working in different software and apps. It's just that that was a lot easier and more accessible for me. And at this point, after I've been practicing traditional art, my traditional art is arguably better than my digital work a lot of the time. I say all that to say that just because you work in a digital medium doesn't mean that you don't know how to draw or paint or anything like that. When you are a digital artist, you still have to know about composition, you still have to know about line weight and, color theory and all of that. You still have to know all of that as an artist. Just like any other art form, it's simply a different medium. It's kind of like just because you can paint doesn't necessarily mean you know how to draw, but you could know how to draw and how to paint. There's just different strokes for different folks. So yeah, there will be people, especially in the fine art world, that look at, digital art a bit differently, but don't let that deter you. If you want to pursue digital art, it's a great practice to get into. So, with that all being said, that was my introduction to the digital art landscape and some of the pros and cons. And I want to announce that I will be doing some tutorials in the near future to help y'all, start your art journey. And it will be around digital art primarily. So if you ever wanted to get into art, especially digital art, go ahead and leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. I'll be doing, like I said, a lot of tutorials going forward. So if that's anything you'd be interested in, also share the video and, let people know about what I'm doing. And yeah, hope you enjoyed the video and hope you guys have a nice rest of your week. And I'll see you on the next one. Peace.